All people deserve to be safe. Safe to flourish, to learn, to exist in a world that offers up its freedom and beauty equally to all to enjoy. And a desire to be safe, to feel safe, is deeply ingrained. From childhood, as in our picture book earlier, we seek reassurance from our grown-ups. And people will go to great lengths to feel reassured. Building up heavy armor, putting all kinds of systems in place to protect ourselves and what we love. And it stops being quite so simple, quite so universal, when safety for some means fear and danger for others. So the question in today's service title, who keeps us safe, is one of the big fundamental human questions. What do we do with our fear? What security blankets do we reach for? Who do we call out to for protection? Different answers across culture and history. Does God keep us safe? Does the king? Do the ancestors? Do our laws? Our violence? It's a big question. It's a big question, but it can also be very specific, very practical. We, neighborhood, exist in the context of a culture and society that encourages us to outsource safety, to outsource that question to security guards, police forces, courts, and prisons. And we owe it to ourselves and our neighbors to ask, is that what we want to do? When things go wrong, when we're unsettled or endangered, are those the systems that we want to look to? Or are there other paths that we might build together? And when we ask who keeps us safe, does us mean all of us? Because if we want us to mean all, then the current police and justice systems cannot keep all of us safe. Everyone here will have had different experiences with policing, neutral, negative, positive, mixed. And I don't expect anything I say here to outweigh those direct experiences. But I'm not certain we're all aware of just how different those experiences might be, even here in progressive, multicultural Toronto. When you are in a public place, maybe a rally, maybe just walking down the street with friends, maybe in an unfamiliar part of town, and you see a uniformed officer, and you know that you are seen by them as well. What feeling does that evoke in you? Is it neutral, like seeing a line worker or a construction crew? Do you feel safer, reassured to know that there's someone on duty, someone keeping an eye out? Do you feel less safe? Are you on edge, suddenly hyper-aware of your hands, your posture, how quickly you're walking? The fact that those answers can and do differ so much from one another, and often along lines of race and class, should tell us that there's something there worth our time and attention. As Jillian shared in her opening words, the surprise that some white Torontonians feel when learning about experiences like Desmond Cole's should lead us to want to learn more. Now, why talk about such a fraught political topic here in the sanctuary of our sacred space, where we come to have our cups filled and our souls tended? One reason is our eighth principle, a desire to take seriously our commitment to dismantling racism and systemic barriers in ourselves and our institutions. If we haven't yet made space to lay our UU values alongside our beliefs and assumptions about policing to see how they align, now is a good time. I admit this topic is a challenge because there is so much to learn once you start looking. The history of policing in Canada, heart-wrenching statistics and stories of bias and brutality, current events here and in the States, personal stories and experiences, complicating nuances that make it impossible or irresponsible to talk as if there is one monolithic Black experience or Indigenous experience or marginalized opinion on policing and safety. I brought along some of the reading I did for this service, and I'll leave these books out after the service so anyone who's interested in more can page through, strike up a conversation, go to the library. there's so much. And I realized I could have spent this entire service just setting the stage for what I really want to say. So I ask your forgiveness for all the things I'm not saying today. Know that it's so I could get to the heart, which is this. The work of creating safety, real safety for ourselves and our communities, is work we can do, all of us. Beyond our commitment to the eighth principle, there is a deep spiritual need at the heart of this conversation to do with the faith we have in our fellow human beings. Whether we can nurture our ability to imagine a future in which we're not so afraid of one another. Whether we can answer the question of who makes us safe, not just with the feeling of being protected by systems of authority, but with a real safety, one that's built from the ground up and maintained by a network of care. A safety that's available to those who have not historically been made safe by all those systems and suits of armor built around us in the past. Let me share a story with you from right here in this congregation. And from before my time here. You might remember it if you've been around for a few years. One Sunday morning, a visibly intoxicated woman made her way into our sanctuary partway through the service and began talking loudly to herself, asking semi-combative rhetorical questions like where God is here. And the service weaver struggled to continue the service. Not just because of the loud talking, but because of the tension and alarm of having someone behaving in such an unpredictable and possibly hostile way. It's scary. It's scary. Unitarian Universalist congregations have been targets of political violence, and someone shouting and not sober can trigger all of our internal danger systems. Suzanne, our music director, began to play on the piano a familiar hymn. When I breathe in peace. When I breathe out love. And the congregation breathed. One member, Chris Emmanuel, who read our story today, moved to sit next to the woman, speaking gently. And another left to go find Pino, the community hub director for this building, to ask for his help. When the woman opened a beer and began to drink it, Chris drew a line, letting her know that drinking alcohol would have to wait until after the service. And Pino showed up, and he recognized our visitor from his work at the Out of the Cold shelter hosted downstairs here. He invited her to go get a slice of pizza with him down the street and just talk. And when they departed together, the service resumed, but with a sense that something important had just happened. I only heard this full story recently, and the congregant who shared it with me also shared that while she was witnessing this, she was quietly weeping, moved by the gentleness of Chris's response and a stranger's distress and obvious need. It can be scary to have someone show up in our space like that. I have cleaned up glass from a brick thrown through my church's door in Illinois. I was a senior in high school when the Knoxville UU Church was the target of a mass shooting. It can be scary, but we know that the vast, vast majority of the time when someone disrupts a worship service, it's because they are in need. They are seeking help in whatever way they can. And Neighborhood was able to react that day in a way that honored the humanity of all involved. But it isn't hard to imagine an alternate ending. If things were just a little different. If Chris wasn't there, if Pino didn't show up, if our visitor had become a bit more erratic or threatening, if the shared music wasn't there to calm the collective nervous system of the room, in an alternate version of events, someone might feel the need to call on the authorities for help, either 911 or the non-emergency line. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we're already the kind of place that would never call the cops for something like that, in which case, amazing, cool. But say that we did. Officers would show up to take care of things, and do what exactly? Maybe just politely repeat the request to leave, but they'd be doing that with guns on their hips. What is it police can do that we want them to do for us? What is it they can do that we can't? They could scare her, arrest her. If we called, they would show up and make us feel safe. but not all of us. For some, this reality has always been part of the background knowledge of your family and your world. Kids of color often get the talk from their parents at a young age, not about the birds and the bees, but about the police and how to survive encounters with them. It's something I had to learn much older. If you're white and you've never had anything but neutral or positive interactions with police, it may be hard to understand how deeply a 911 call can terrorize your Black, brown, indigenous neighbors. In Desmond Cole's 2015 article, he writes about how even a perfectly pleasant interaction with a police officer left his hands shaking and heart pounding in a cold sweat, too paralyzed by fear even to walk away after the officer dismissed him. This is part of my commitment to the eighth principle, remembering that what makes some feel safer represents terror and trauma to others, challenging myself to find different ways that can create safety for all, alternatives to reaching for the comfortable, authority-shaped solution to any fear or alarm. A neighborhood is a place that I believe can live up to this challenge. We are already on our way. There were a handful of congregants trained in de-escalation a few years ago. Maybe that's something we could revisit. Our connections with Pinot, with Out of the Cold, with our interfaith neighbors, all are worth nurturing and all add to a type of safety that only comes when we're woven into a network of mutual care. I said at the beginning that the work of creating safety is work we can do. It is work, but it's also joy. It's music, it's mutual aid. It's asking, what do people need to actually be safe? And then doing whatever we can to make it possible for them to get it. Rent, medical care, genuine human connections with people who will notice when all is not well. We can imagine a world where safety is not something we outsource. And we can learn how from communities that have been living that way for a long time. Black, indigenous, queer, homeless, Palestinian communities who haven't ever been able to look to the authorities for safety or stability. Was it a coincidence that in our majority white congregation, it was a man of color who knew how to speak to our disruptive visitor that day, knew how to risk turning toward discomfort, proximity, even danger in that moment? Is it a coincidence that the city of Minneapolis, the city that saw George Floyd murdered nearly 6 years ago and reckoned with a historical loss of faith in law enforcement, has been the city full of regular people showing up for their neighbors, paying their rents, buying their groceries, protecting their children, and putting lives on the line to protect one another? In her book, We Do This Till We Free Us, Mariame Kaba, a Black American prison abolitionist, wrote that when people, especially white people, consider a world without police, they envision a society just as violent as our current one, but without law enforcement, and they shudder. But it is possible to envision something else entirely. A world where safety comes from solidarity, from having one another's backs, where law enforcement doesn't magically disappear, but where it stops being the go-to solution for all of society's problems. The city of Toronto piloted a community crisis service back in 2022, which has now expanded to the whole city, a specifically non-police response team able to show up for the community without guns, without cuffs, with the type of training and resources that might actually de-escalate a crisis. It's a fantastic step forward, it really is. And yet, for every dollar that goes to the Toronto Police, this crisis service gets 1.9 cents. The Toronto Police have a publicity campaign running right now called Make the Right Call. You might have seen it. It's meant to educate the public about different phone numbers that we can call to receive different kinds of help. The messages run on online ads and public transit. And I saw one a little while ago with a multiple choice question. If your neighbors are having a loud party that goes on past 1 a.m. and starts to spill out onto the street, who should you call? And the options were 911, 211, or the non-emergency police line. And I felt a bit taken aback when I saw it because it seemed like the obvious answer wasn't on the list. The correct answer, according to the ad, is to call the non-emergency line. But who should I call if my neighbor's party is bothering me? My neighbor. Why is calling my neighbor not an option? And I know I'm not the only one who has that thought. I mean, even if I hated my neighbor, even if I was afraid of my neighbor, in what world would threatening arrest or violence be a proportionate response to a loud party? This is partly what made me realize there is a spiritual matter here worthy of bringing to a Sunday morning. How is it we're so alienated from the people around us that we're expected to call on a police force to have what could be a simple human interaction? We have so much fear of our neighbors, so little faith in our own ability to navigate what might be difficult or uncomfortable interactions with one another. Abolitionism is radical politics, and I suspect not the politics of many people here. But in many marginalized communities, its goals don't feel radical or like naive idealism, but like practical necessity, as obvious as calling your neighbor first. When history and experience show that policing adds more violence than it prevents, people must imagine a world beyond it. Must begin building structures of life, family, justice, art, resources that respond to the harms of the world without leaning on outside enforcement. And there's possibility here. That day here in the sanctuary when someone in our community was behaving in a scary way, we breathed in and out, spoke gently, found a familiar face, a community resource, and everybody was safe at the end of the day. If we can take that kernel and plant it, nurture it, listen to the wisdom of communities who have done this before, expand our imagination of what kind of world might be possible, then we are doing sacred work. The work of safety, real safety, is the work of our faith. Not just here at Neighborhood, but everywhere Unitarian Universalist congregations gather and strive to imagine beloved communities into being. May 1,000 better ways be possible. May we be part of finding, building, and nurturing them. Blessed be. Amen. And with that, we will have music once again. Let me invite Lily forward to introduce Samudna's next song.